My boyfriend woke up with no memory of me, or the past 5 years of our life together. Hey Reddit. I don't even know where to begin with this, but I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I need someone to tell me if this has ever happened to anyone else. Last night, something happened to my boyfriend, something I can't explain, and I'm terrified. My boyfriend and I have been together for 5 years. We met through mutual friends, and since that first night, we just clicked. We moved in together about 2 years ago, and everything's been going great. We've talked about getting married, buying a place together, even starting a family. He's my person, you know? I thought I knew everything about him. But last night, he woke up in the middle of the night, sitting straight up in bed, looking around the room like he had no idea where he was. I groggily asked if he was okay, and he just stared at me, wide-eyed and confused. I thought maybe he was just half awake, maybe disoriented, so I told him, "Hey, it's me. Are you okay?" He squinted, and after a moment, he just whispered, "Who are you?" At first, I thought he was messing with me, pulling some weird joke. But his face was blank, completely serious. I kept trying to tell him it was me, his girlfriend, but the confusion on his face didn't budge. After a few minutes of back and forth, I was practically begging him to stop, just stop with the joke. But he looked like he was about to have a panic attack, so I reached out to touch his shoulder. He flinched. Then, he said something that broke me. "I remember my life up until maybe a month ago, but I don't remember you." According to him, he's been in a relationship with a different person, his ex-girlfriend, and the last thing he remembers is the two of them talking about moving in together. He couldn't remember me, our life together, the trips we've taken, or the way he proposed just 6 months ago. Nothing. I tried to jog his memory, pulling up photos on my phone, our shared messages, even the sappy texts he'd send me when he was bored at work. He looked at them, studied them, but there was just nothing. His face was blank, like he was looking at someone else's life. He ended up sleeping on the couch because he was so uncomfortable being near me. I cried myself to sleep in our bed, wondering if I'd somehow wake up and this would all be a bad dream. But it's not. This morning, he was still the same, still looking at me like I was a stranger. He's currently in the guest room, scrolling through his own social media, reading through years' worth of posts he supposedly wrote, places he visited, captions he left for me. And he doesn't remember any of it. He says it feels like he's reading about someone else's life. I've tried reaching out to his family and close friends, but they're as stunned as I am. They know he hasn't had any sort of accident or trauma, as far as anyone can tell. But he keeps insisting that something feels wrong, that it's like he's skipped over the last 5 years and been dropped into a new life that isn't his. I don't know what to do. Do I push him to remember, or is that just going to make it worse? Right now, he's agreed to see a doctor, but I'm not sure that'll fix anything. If anyone has been through anything remotely like this, please, let me know. I feel like I've lost him in a single night. Update. First off, thank you to everyone who commented and messaged with advice or even just to say they were thinking of us. It honestly made me feel less alone during all of this, and I've read every single message. I wanted to update you on what's happened over the last few days because things have only gotten stranger. After my post, my boyfriend, I'll call him Tom for privacy, agreed to see a neurologist. He admitted that he was scared. Part of him wanted to believe it was all a mistake or a weird dream he'd eventually snap out of. But after 2 days, he still didn't recognize me, our home, or anything from the last 5 years. The neurologist ran a series of tests, MRI, blood work, the whole 9 yards. Every test came back normal. No signs of trauma, no tumors, no evidence of a seizure. They suggested seeing a psychologist in case this was some kind of dissociative episode or psychological block. So, we went to a psychologist. They did a few preliminary sessions, asked him about his life, and gave him memory exercises. The psychologist's initial theory was that maybe there was some emotional trigger that caused his mind to block out certain memories, but Tom insists he doesn't feel any kind of fear or trauma related to the idea of me or our relationship. He's just blank. The psychologist suggested a memory recall exercise where I'd tell Tom stories about our past, and we'd look through photos together to see if anything sparked recognition. So we sat down, and I started with something small, our first date. I recounted how we met at a little Italian place downtown, how he spilled his water all over the table 5 minutes in and then blushed so hard he couldn't look me in the eye for the next 10 minutes. I laughed, expecting him to at least smile, but his face stayed completely neutral, like he was listening to a story about strangers. I showed him photos from that date, and he said he could see it was him in the photos, but it felt as though he was looking at another person, a different life. I could feel myself getting desperate, grabbing for memories, showing him the ticket stubs we saved from a concert he took me to, souvenirs from our road trip. Nothing. Then something happened. I mentioned our cat, Muffin, who we adopted together 2 years ago. His face softened for a split second, and he muttered, I feel like I know this cat. It was the first time I'd seen even a flicker of recognition in him. I brought Muffin over, and he actually started tearing up, petting her like she was some distant memory just out of reach. He said he had no memory of adopting her but felt a deep, unexplainable connection to her. That glimmer of hope led us to try more. We revisited other places we loved, like our favorite coffee shop, the park where he proposed, and even his parents' house, who are just as baffled by this whole situation. It was the same everywhere. He'd sometimes get these familiar feelings, but they were never strong enough to break through. This has all been emotionally exhausting. Tom's polite, even kind, but he's still very distant with me, like I'm some acquaintance he's staying with. He keeps apologizing, saying he wishes he could remember me because I seem amazing, and every time he says that, it breaks my heart a little more. To him, I'm basically a stranger he feels obligated to live with. Last night, something even stranger happened. I was scrolling through my own photos on my phone, just reliving our memories for myself, when I came across a video I didn't remember taking. It was from about 6 months ago. In the video, Tom is sitting on our couch, and he's holding a journal. He's laughing, and he says, if you're watching this, babe, I'm probably asleep in the next room, or maybe you're on the couch beside me. Either way, I just wanted to say, I love you, and you're my whole world. And if I ever, I don't know, forget you or something, I know that sounds dumb, but if that ever happened, just know I'd find my way back to you. He laughed, calling himself cheesy, then the video cut out. I was completely stunned. I don't even remember him making that video, but hearing him say those words, almost like he somehow knew this could happen, it left me with chills. I showed it to him, thinking it might trigger something, but he just stared at the screen, his face blank again, and whispered, I don't remember saying that. I feel like I'm living in some sort of surreal, twisted dream. Part of me wonders if maybe he was struggling with something he never told me, and that's what led to this. But the rational part of me can't explain how he'd just forget 5 entire years of his life. I'll keep updating if anything changes, but right now, I feel like I'm mourning someone who's still physically here. I'm trying to stay hopeful, but each day feels like he's drifting further away from me. Days turned into weeks, and I held on to every small sliver of hope, every hint that maybe Tom would wake up one morning and it would all come flooding back. We kept visiting the psychologist, I kept taking him to all our favorite spots, bringing out mementos, and introducing him to our friends. But the longer we went on, the more strained things became. He was gentle and polite with me, but I could feel him slipping further away. Then, one night, he sat me down on the couch. I could tell he'd been rehearsing what he wanted to say, and as soon as he opened his mouth, I knew where it was going. Look, I don't know how else to say this, he began, his voice shaky. I know, logically, we've been together for years. I've seen the proof. I trust what you're saying. But I don't feel anything. It's like I've been trying to force a memory, a feeling that just won't come. He paused, swallowing hard, his hands clenched. I care about you, but it's like I'm living someone else's life. And I can't keep pretending I'm someone I don't remember being. I begged him to keep trying, to give it more time, but he just shook his head, tears brimming in his eyes. I wish I could, but I don't think I'll ever be the person I was with you. He ended up packing a few things that night and left, saying he was going to stay with his brother until he could figure things out. He told me to keep the apartment because it was my home. And then he walked out of my life. The months that followed were a blur of heartbreak and anger and sleepless nights. Our friends tried to help, but there was nothing anyone could say. It felt like I'd lost him twice, first to some unexplainable memory loss and then again, in a way that felt so final. I kept telling myself he'd come back, that he'd remember, but he never did. The worst part was running into him almost a year later. I was at a coffee shop, one we'd used to go to together all the time. He walked in, smiling and holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize. They laughed together, leaning close, lost in their own world. When he looked up and noticed me, there was a flash of recognition in his eyes, but not the kind I'd hoped for. It was the look you'd give an old classmate, a distant face you'd seen once but couldn't quite place. He nodded politely, then turned his attention back to her. I left quickly, feeling hollow, like I'd been erased from his life completely. Seeing him with her felt like a final chapter closing, proof that whatever we'd had was gone forever. Update. It's been 2 years since everything happened, and I've come to terms with it, more or less. Therapy has helped, and I've started building my life again, though there are days I still feel like a piece of me is missing. People say you should let go of the past, but it's hard when you know the love of your life is still out there, just living a life that no longer includes you. Tom and I haven't spoken since that day at the coffee shop. From what I've heard, he's still with the woman he was with that day, and they're apparently happy. I try to find peace in that, telling myself maybe he's found his own version of happiness, even if I'm no longer a part of it. As for me, I'm moving forward, but I don't know if I'll ever really let go of the memories. They're all I have left of a love that, at least to me, was once everything. Story 2. Aita for calling my girlfriend childish and telling her to leave after she intentionally destroyed a gift that I got for my little sister? My girlfriend Megan and I stay together. She had a fight with her parents and asked if we could move in together, so we did. Not too long ago, I had to take my little sister in. I can't disclose much except the fact that I was her only option. When we had the talk about me having to take my sister in, Megan did not like the idea. She told me that I was too young to have such a responsibility, what will happen when we get married and have our own kids, our place was too small, etc., but didn't outright say she had an issue with it. I obviously couldn't turn my back on my sister, so I went ahead with it despite her reservations. Although my sister has always been friendly to Megan from the moment she met her, Megan is always just indifferent. And it sucks because my sister really admires her and enjoys talking to her. I just thought maybe they don't connect because of my sister's age. A month ago I bought my sister a Switch. She has always wanted one and all her friends have it. I figured she deserved it as she does well at school, helps with chores and is generally a well-behaved kid. She loved it and she has been taking good care of it. Megan wasn't happy when I bought it, she actually sulked. She would borrow the Switch incessantly and my sister would not say no, maybe because she was afraid to? But Megan would use it so much that it felt like it belonged to her. My sister never said anything, she would just patiently wait for her turn. Sometimes Megan would use it even when my sister was at school, saying that she gets bored when I'm at work. All this made me uncomfortable, so I asked her to please tone down on the Switch as it's unfair on my sister, it was her gift. Megan agreed, although it was clear that she was upset. She gave us the silent treatment for the rest of the night. Last week when I came back from picking up my sister from school after work, we found her Switch broken. And that's putting it lightly, it looked like it was deliberately smashed. My sister was distraught. When I asked Megan WTF happened, she told us that she accidentally dropped it and it broke. It was obvious that she was lying, and when I pointed that out and all the other times where she seemed to have an issue with an 11-year-old for no reason, she got annoyed and told me that everything was fine until my sister moved in. I called her childish and asked her to please pack her bags and go back to her parents' house because I need space and time to think. This only made her more annoyed, but she eventually left. Her best friend texted me last night to tell me that I was an asshole for kicking Megan out because on top of everything else, I know how rocky her relationship with her parents are. Does this make me an a-hole? Story 3. Sister couldn't properly arrange childcare for my doctor's appointment. I had a doctor's appointment today and my mother was taking me and also going in with me because I wanted her to. My mother looks after her granddaughter, too, on Fridays, but she told my sister at the start of the week that she couldn't do it this week because she was taking me to an appointment. She gave her the time of the appointment and my sister said that was all right and she would get it sorted. On Wednesday our mother reminded her and my sister said she had it all sorted out and her boyfriend was coming over to look after her and he can just stay at the house with her while we're away. Then today this morning her boyfriend arrives at our house and he comes in and he told our mother that he had to be elsewhere for a certain time, so he couldn't actually stay. Apparently he told my sister this but she never told our mom, so our mother texted her and apparently my sister replied saying, "Oh yes, sorry, I forgot to tell you that, lol." So he drove 40 minutes to our house for no reason because of my sister. Our mother was pissed because in the time frame he had it wouldn't have worked anyway because he had to be back at his house by the time my appointment started. Her boyfriend offered to take his daughter with him but my mother just said we would take her, which I thought was an awful idea, but she said, "I know it's not ideal but don't worry, she's normally good at the doctor's, it shouldn't be a problem." In the waiting room she didn't shut up, she was running around singing and I was just ignoring her and pretending she wasn't there because it was annoying me so badly. Then in the actual office she was even worse and wouldn't stop, basically whining and shit, all while we were trying to speak to the doctor. Overall the experience was awful and my sister basically ruined the entire thing and it was all about my niece instead of me. I understand that I could have just went in by myself but I wanted my mother there and I didn't think my niece would be as annoying as she was. I just sat in silence the whole way home because of how pissed off I was and my mother said she didn't even want to speak to my sister because she was also super annoyed about the whole situation. Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him. I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years. So I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road on the same day I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later and I didn't bother answering, but through my window I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already, I wasn't digging the neighborhood. But I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house, so my gate was blocked more often than never, but a "no parking" sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week, I was having a shower in my bathroom and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next door neighbor's water pump going. Now this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-storied house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold, and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything, and yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supply's pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off, and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious, but if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years this house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks. So it was chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water, and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days, thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week and watering my garden, only cost like $5 per month, even with the neighbor also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it, and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was really simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on, and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country, is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s-era wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part, because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services are grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalized, but they still have to pay the fines and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now, the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants, and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring and burned out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water, and I said, oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe and I turned it off till the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue. Y'all, the look on his face. He kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, oh okay, and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and a neighbor who could potentially be a pain in the ass, by simply flicking a tap off. 2 birds 1 stone I'd say. TLDR, bought an abandoned house, neighbor was siphoning water from my supply. Turned off my water supply when the motor was running, motor burned out the wiring in the house and cut off water and power to him and his tenants. Tenants lodged police complaints and the landlord got fined, is now destitute and forced to move in with his daughter.